Good morning, everybody. How are you doing? A little bit better. Come on. How are you doing? All right, great. For those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm sorry. I feel like you're missing out on something great. I am Chief Customer Officer at Box, but the sort of inside joke I had with my team I shared with a couple people last night is I'm CCO, but really my real title is Vice President of I'm Sorry. I think we're all in that position a little bit where we tend to spend a fair amount of our time apologizing for things we didn't do wrong, and that's a great life skill to have. I've got a couple of kids. They're pre-teenagers, and I was getting ready for the trip a few days ago, and they're pre-teenagers, so they're still somewhat interested in me, and they asked me, where I was going, what I was going for, and I said, I'm going to a customer success conference in Utah. And they were like, wow, that is so cool. That's really cool. And I was really happy. I was like, yeah, they're proud of me and customer success. I'm like, yeah, customer success is really cool. They're like, no. Utah, tell us about Utah, right? I said, Utah is amazing. I've not spent a lot of time there. It's really incredible. The scenery is amazing. The people are probably the nicest people to come across in the country. I said, but the coolest thing about Utah, I said, if we lived there, apparently there'd be 4 more of you. Think about that for a second. So I'm here to talk to you about building a customer-centric culture, and it's something that I think we've done a reasonable job at Box. I've been with Box for about 8 years, and what I'm hoping to do is leave you with a few ideas about how to think about it and some practical things that you can do in your own organization that will help you kind of get there too. And this, like all stories about customer success, is a story about relationships. I'm going to tell you a little story, and I think it will resonate for a lot of you. But I do have one quick question before I start, which is how many of you have been working in software since 2000, let's say 2003 or sooner, or more recently? So pretty good. Okay, so the rest of you have been in software for longer than that, or you're not in software at all. So if you started in software before 2003, raise your hand. All right, so you people, you're my people, right? Been around for a while. This is really going to resonate with you. The rest of you might be slightly confused by what I'm about to tell you, but I'm going to tell you about a story about relationships. And all good stories start with once upon a time. So, you ready? Come with me on this story? All right, great. Okay. Once upon a time, this is the way things were in software, right? People bought software in a centralized way, IT-driven purchasing decisions. There were these rigid Big Bang implementations. You spend 6 to 12 months doing an implementation. We had very clearly defined scope and hard boundaries for what was in scope and out of scope. Anything that was a scope change was a big deal. Companies were making 10 to 15-year investments in software. And as a result of that, we as customers were locked in, right? Does this sound familiar for the people who had their hands up before? Okay, for the people who started software from like 2003, 2005 or sooner, this seems really confusing, right? It's like, well, why would anyone do it that way? This is how we used to do it. Do you want to hear another crazy thing for you young people? You guys want to hear something? Let me ask you a question. Those people who put their hands up first, how many of you have a shipping department in your company? Funny, right? The way we used to recognize revenue, literally, was by shipping something out the door, right? And at the end of the quarter, when we'd hit our number and we actually didn't want any more revenue for the quarter, guess what we did? We told the shipping guys to go home. Turn off the lights. Don't send anything else out. This is how we used to do it, right? I'm not making this up, right? All right, cool. So, as a result of this, 10 to 15-year sort of purchasing decisions, sometimes partners who loved each other at the beginning stayed together long after they'd fallen out of love, right? You were stuck. And what I would venture to say is that the SaaS business model changed all of that. And I think we tend to think about SaaS, largely as a technology change, right? Software as a service, integrating various services, best of breed, all that sort of thing. But I think what's more fundamental was the business model change. And if you think about the then and the now, and it may not be a perfect set of analogies here, but used to be driven by IT, end users make choices now, right? They can try your software before they buy it. They're very influential in purchasing decisions. Work is much more agile in real time. There's an expectation of much quicker time to value. Subscriptions are not, there are no 10 to 15-year purchases. Our customers are on 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, sometimes even monthly arrangements. And you're not stuck with any one vendor, right? Because we believe in a best-of-breed model where you can stitch things together through integration, and you can change your mind about a piece of software every 1, 2, or 3 years and just swap it out, right? This is a very different model, and it's a model that's been great for our customers. And the result, I would say, is that customers are at the center of your business, or you don't have a business. Do you agree? Yes. More resoundingly, do you agree? Yes. Yeah, all right. And that's why we're all here. So that's the end of the story. Thank you. So I'll tell you a little bit about Box, and I'll tell you about some of the things that we've done. At Box, our mission is to power how the world works together. If you don't know us, we're a cloud content management platform. We make it really easy for people to store unstructured content, share it with other people, and then build applications integrations on top of that. Today, we've been around for about 15 years. Today, we have about 69% of the Fortune 500 are paying customers of ours, enterprise customers, and we are incredibly proud of the brands and the companies that we have as customers. But this wouldn't have happened, I don't think, unless we had a very customer-centric culture. And to sort of demonstrate that, in 2011, the year that I started at Box, we sat down and we wrote out the company's values. And we did it collaboratively with employees. We didn't have management tell people what our values were. But we wrote down 7 values. And those 7 values largely exist as written today. And the one value that has not changed at all in the way we've written it is this value that we call blow our customers' minds. So we have had a core value that is built around the idea of customer centricity almost since the beginning. And I think that has informed a lot of what we've done with how we built our products and services and the way we think about our customers and what we do. If you think about Box originally as a sort of peer-to-peer file sharing, consumer-focused tool, we got into the enterprise because we discovered that there were enterprise companies like Procter & Gamble who were using Box to solve business problems. And we went and talked to them, sort of like what Carrie was talking about. We went and talked to them and said, what are you doing? Why are you using Box? And they were using credit cards, right, to pay for it, essentially using personal accounts for enterprise purposes. And we discovered that there was a real demand in the enterprise, but there were a bunch of features that were missing in the product. So the first version of our admin console was built with direct feedback from one of our customers who said, this is what I need for this to be a really useful tool for me in the enterprise. And then we can start going bigger. So when I started, we had 1 enterprise sales rep. We now have a team of over 300. And we have the customer list that we have now. But I believe it's really fundamentally because we've thought very much about the user and the customer at the center of what we do. Now, it's probably obvious to all of you, but why does customer centricity matter? Well, it matters to all of your key stakeholders, right? To your customer, obviously, they will derive more significant outcomes. They care about the relationships they have with you. They want to have a delightful experience. If you have a customer-centric culture, this is what you're going to deliver. Shareholders, revenue, growth, profitability, these all happen when you have happy, repeating customers, right? We all know that in a recurring revenue business model, we lose money in the first year for sure. We probably lose money in the second year, and it's probably only at the second or third renewal, that we start generating a profit on our customers. So for your shareholders, if you don't have a customer-centric culture that keeps customers engaged for a long period of time, they'll never earn back the investment they made. And interestingly, on the employee side, there was a study done by SurveyMonkey last year that they published where they found that employees who believe that you as a company truly are customer-centric, in other words, that you truly care about your customers' outcomes, those employees are more highly engaged than the ones who don't believe that. So this isn't just good for your shareholders and your customers, it's actually good for your employees, and it's good for employee retention. And we have an incredibly, I think, loyal and engaged employee base, and I think a lot of it is because of our approach to our customers. Now, I would argue that every company will claim that customers are at the center of their business. Do you agree? Okay, how many of you have a CEO who says, customers are at the center of our business? I'll take business cliches for 500, Alex. They probably also say employees are our greatest asset, most valuable asset, right? Okay, good, same people. But cliches aside, there's a problem with this idea of customers being at the center of your business, and here's sort of what I think it looks like. Imagine that your customers truly are at the center of your business, okay? And there's a set of concentric circles around your customer. Now, the circle that's closest to your customer, I would argue, are your salespeople and your teams, customer success, support. These are the people who are actually talking to customers every day, right? They're very, very close to customers. They understand what works, what doesn't work, what their challenges are. But there's another set of circles that sort of go around that start to get further and further away from your customer. And you could debate about sort of who lives where, but the next circle, I would say, are probably your product managers and your marketing team. They think about customers because they have to build products for customers, they have to know how to market to customers, but they rarely talk to customers. We're pretty lucky at Box where our product managers actually spend a lot of time in front of customers, but in most software companies, I've been at 3 now, they really don't engage with customers that directly. And marketers, are there any marketers here? Okay, great, so I'm not gonna upset anybody. Marketers don't really talk to customers. Do you agree? It's pretty rare. And if you don't believe me, here's how you can test it. Here's an experiment you can do. Introduce one of your marketers to one of your customers, like in person. And here's what will happen. First, they're gonna get kind of confused, and they're gonna say, "What is that?" It's a customer. What do they do? They pay your salary. Why do they have legs? What do you mean? Marketers, their only interaction with customers is those testimonial videos, where you see them from the torso up. They didn't even know that they have legs, okay? It's true. And then as you go further out, right, you have people in operations and engineering and finance and your HR team. These are people, and it kind of goes back to what Carrie was talking about with specialization, right? We've designed our organizations to be specialized, and the result is you have people who are very good at their jobs, but their jobs don't involve them talking to customers or even thinking about customers, right? If you think about our world, and I think you can all think about an analogy in your own companies, but we're cloud content management. So what do? Fundamentally, we store files. Well, guess what storing files involves? Lots of hard drives, okay? So picture this. A truck backs up to a loading dock in a data center in Nevada. And a forklift takes a pallet of hard drives off that truck and rolls it into a server cage. And then somebody's job is to take those hard drives off the pallet, unpackage them, and slide them into a rack. That's someone's job, right? Box pays for someone to do that. So question, how many minutes a day do you think that person is thinking about our customers? 0. 0. And here's what's crazy. The hard drives that they're sliding in, probably within a few days, are going to start to fill up with encrypted files that might store clinical trial data for a company like AstraZeneca who is trying to come up with a cancer medication. Or a design for a store renovation for Starbucks that uses Box. Like, there are real things happening on those hard drives, and the person whose job it is to do that is so far removed from what the customer is doing, they don't even think about it. Now, for the most part, this doesn't really, you could argue it doesn't matter, right? They're doing their job, they're doing it well, it doesn't matter. But we believe that getting the entire company engaged and understanding and thinking about our customers is really core to what we do. And I would encourage you to do the same. So to make this sort of more practical, we've been thinking about this a lot, and we kind of came up with 6 areas or categories or pillars, tenets, if you will, of customer centricity that I would encourage you to think about. And I'll give you a couple of examples of things that we're doing here. And the first one, I think it's pretty obvious. Everyone talks about it. It's customer outcomes. And I think the point here is make sure that you are delivering real business value to your customers. And then very importantly, communicate it relentlessly, both internally and to your customers, right? Don't let them forget the value that they're deriving from their investment in your product. This is really core, and I think probably doesn't really need much explanation. The second one is another one you'll hear a lot, voice of the customer. And this is one where I think the term is used in a whole bunch of different ways, right? And it means a lot of different things to different people. Sometimes it might mean things like testimonials that we talked about before, getting your customer to be a customer advocate. I mean it in a very particular way, which is all of your customers have a voice, and I think the responsibility that we have in customer success is to amplify that voice internally. And sometimes I would think that CS people are a little shy about that, right? We tend to celebrate sales and product and that sort of thing, and so CS tends to be a little bit more quiet. And I think what we need to do is actually be much louder. And if people are nervous about being louder, what you need to remind them is it's not you, it's not your voice, it's your customer's voice that you're amplifying. And we tend to think a lot about customer success as, these are the responsibilities we have to our customers. Here's what we do for our customers. But don't forget, equally, we have an obligation to our companies, and that is to bring that voice of the customer inside and use it to actually improve your products and services, right? Now, this is really hard. We have 95,000 customers. There isn't a customer voice. There's 95,000 customer voices. And actually, there's more than that because you have different stakeholders at different levels. This is not an easy thing to do. But I do think a core responsibility of customer success is to take all of that feedback and curate it and distill it down to what matters, and then drive that inside your company to improve your products and services. Okay? And we do that through things like user voice. So we have a feedback mechanism that we share and co-own with the product team. We have a quarterly product interlock, and I would encourage you all to do this. As your companies get bigger and the teams start to move further away, we have a formal mechanism where the product team takes feedback from a variety of go-to-market stakeholders, including customer success, and we tell them every quarter what we think the top 5 tactical and top 5 strategic product initiatives we think they should be working on. Surprisingly, they don't always do what we say. But we have a voice, and we have a seat at the table, and they have to incorporate that feedback into how they think about the product roadmap going forward. I encourage you to have a mechanism like that. Okay. Customer perspective. This one, actually, I'm going to come back to this one, because this one I think is the hardest one to sort of explain. So let me move on. Customer delight. Everyone talks about customer delight. I hate the term customer happiness. I don't think our job is to make customers happy. I think our job is to deliver business outcomes for our customers and ideally do it in a delightful way. That may or may not make them happy people, but I think our job is to deliver as delightful an experience as we can. And I think what you want to do from a customer success leadership perspective is empower your employees to use whatever term you want. We use blow our customers' minds through exceptional customer experiences. And I think empower is really important here. You are not always going to be the person who tells the employee exactly what to do in every customer situation. They have to believe that they have the right and they've been empowered to do the right thing for customers. And I'll tell you a pretty cool story. So I got an email one day, and I think I was at a conference. I think mostly my job is apologizing and going to conferences. So I was I think I was somewhere, and I missed an email from one of my CSMs. And I didn't look at it till I think later that night or the next morning. And the email basically said that we have a customer who was in the process of going live. And some of you will know this company. They're a gas pipeline company in the Northeast, and they had a major explosion that happened, I think, in the Boston area. And the CSM's reaction was, we really need to help them. They were sort of in the middle of deploying Box, and all of a sudden they were in sort of war room mode. And they thought they could actually use Box to kind of help collaborate and coordinate some of the efforts they had around remediating this issue. And the CSM had emailed me and said, the AE and I would like to fly to Boston and sort of hunker down with the customer and help them in any way we can. And I never got the email. I didn't see it till later. The next email I got from the CSM said, I didn't hear back from you. I booked a flight, and I'm in Boston with the AE. And they spent, I think, 3 days with the customer in their war room, basically doing whatever they could. And it wasn't just Box related. It was like anything they could do to help, they were there to help with. That's a cool story. And obviously, there was some expense associated with whatever. But I think the key message here is they didn't wait for me to give them permission to do what they thought was the right thing to do for the customer. Okay? So you can't engineer these things. You can't tell people to do stuff like that. You just have to create a culture where they think that's the right thing to do, and they do it. Okay? So I'd encourage you to think about that. We all talk about customer relationships. And for us, we do some of this programmatically. A lot of it is just through the work we do with our CSMs and our service owners, our admins, and so forth. We also do a lot of work with things like advisory boards, an exec sponsor program. And these are really key to both building and nurturing these customer relationships, but also getting feedback on the product and going back to the voice of the customer piece that I talked about earlier. So I would encourage you to really get systematic about how you drive customer relationships, which sounds sort of weird to talk about that. Like relationships are sort of a very human thing, but you've got to create systems and processes, again, advisory boards, ESPs, that sort of thing, to go build and nurture those deep relationships. We have relationships with CIOs where when a CIO is leaving their job and hasn't been announced yet, they will actually tell our CEO. Some of them are on text strings with him and say like, hey, just a heads up, I'm leaving company X and I'm going to company Y, before it's been announced publicly. It takes a long time to build and nurture those kinds of relationships, but they're really, really valuable. And then the last area, and again, it won't be any surprise, is this area of customer advocacy. And we think of this as building an army of fanatical advocates who will tell our story from their perspective, right? And these are things like we use Influitive, for example, as an advocacy sort of platform. We do what we call Box Local meetups, where we get people together. Part of that is for knowledge sharing, but part of it is also you've got some real fans, and the more you can kind of build that community. Our CEO is actually in Minneapolis this week and met with one of our Box Local user group folks who's hosting a meeting, I think next week, and she was just raving about the opportunity to go do that and get in front of her peers in that local area and talk about what cool things she's doing with Box. So I feel like there was one more example I want to share with you on advocacy, but I think that's pretty good. But I want to go back to customer perspective, because this is the one I think is really a little more nuanced, and I think we're doing some cool things here. And the idea here is, if you go back to my concentric circle diagram, and you remember that as you specialize and as your company grows, there are more and more people in your company whose job is not to think about customers. And if you want to change that, you have to find ways to kind of get the customer perspective into and at the forefront of the minds of your employees. Now I think it's a little bit different than voice of the customer, because it's not for any particular purpose. It's not for the purpose of improving your products and services. It's just getting your employees to think more naturally about your customers. So a lot of you probably have conference rooms that are named for your customers, right? Yes? No? Maybe they're like elm and maple and oak. For bands, that's cool, okay. So this is a simple idea. We have 5 or 6 floors at our headquarters at Box. The floor that I sit on, which is the go-to-market floor, every conference room is named for a customer. That's great. You know when it's not great? No, when customers are there, it's really cool. It's like, look, like I've met with GE in the GE conference room. It's super cool, right? But sometimes they churn, right? That stinks. But it's still important, I think, to just have people walk around and like, that's a customer, that's a customer, that's a customer. So there's lots of things that you can do to kind of bring that more to the forefront. We have a weekly, believe it or not, at 2,000 employees, we still have a weekly Friday lunch where the whole company's invited. We live stream for remote employees. And we talk about the state of the business, kind of what's going on, product updates, roadmap. But whenever possible, we bring customers in. And we do a live fireside chat between our CEO and a customer. We talk about, what are they doing with Box? Why did they pick Box? What are their use cases? And we ask them for feedback. So you got a bunch of engineers sitting at lunch, and you're the customer. Tell the engineers what you'd like us to do better. We do hackathons once or twice a year. In the last 2 hackathons, we've actually invited customers to come into our hackathons and participate in them and stay up all night with our engineers and product managers and go build something. And again, it gives us a sense of what the customers are doing. Carrie talked about customer empathy. You start to understand the problems and challenges that they have in a real way and also build relationships. It's pretty cool. The one I'm sort of proudest of, though, is something we've been doing for almost 1.5 years now, which was my CEO's idea, but he then handed it to me and said, you go do this. Every Sunday night, sometimes Monday morning, if Sunday night's not a great night for me, I send an email to the entire company with one customer story, okay? Sounds really simple, but do that week after week after week. Find a story, find a compelling use case, figure out what the customer outcomes are, and communicate that to the whole company in a compelling way is actually pretty hard. And one of the things we've done, it's sort of a trick that we figured out, and we have a broad customer base, so this is probably a little bit easier for us than it might be if you've got a smaller customer base, is we tie the week's story to something that's going on in the world. And the idea is that we make it relevant to for people in a way that they can connect with. So we have a lot of customers, for example, in the media and entertainment business. You all know the Joker movie that just came out, right? Just won an award at the Venice Film Festival. Part of the production was actually done using Box technology, right? So the email I'm going to write on Sunday night is going to be about how Warner Brothers is actually used Box to help create that movie. Super timely, super relevant, and if you're a Batman fan, that's really cool, and you can talk to your friends and family about it. Be like, hey, that movie, like, Box was used to build it. The first one we ever wrote was actually a DJ that the people who raised their hands first, the younger people, would know. I had no idea who he was. Turned out he's a Box customer, And he sent a little 1-minute video, just sort of selfie video to us, basically saying, hey, Boxers, just want to let you know, I use Box, I love it, it's great, it's how I create my music. And that was the first email we sent out. And people I didn't know in the company were like, this is so cool. The DJ, you guys ever heard of Zed? Cool, right? So he's a Box user. Don't tell anyone I said that. It's our secret. That's how it started. And the reaction was so cool. I think I got 20 emails back with like, that is so cool. It's like, how do we do this every single week? I mean, we've been doing it now, like I said, for about a year and a half. And tying it into something that's relevant in culture that people can relate to has been a really interesting hook for us. We get really great feedback on it. So I'd encourage you to find something similar to that. So these are just a few ideas that I've got for you in terms of like how to create a more customer-centric culture in your company. But I have to admit, we don't always get it right. You won't always get it right. And I'll just give you kind of one interesting example. It's not crazy, but these are just a few marketing slides that we've put together in the past, and they're pretty cool. They got the company logo. They talk a little bit about kind of what they're doing with Box and so forth. But if you really look at these, they're not really deep on products and features of Box, but they really don't talk much about the customer, right? Sales leverages Box to share and collaborate on mobile content. Well, what does that mean? Why does that matter, right? And probably a year and a half, 2 years ago, this is the kind of marketing content we would create. And we realized this is not really a very customer-centric view. And so what we've done now, if you look at this kind of content, we'll talk very specifically about what is the benefit to the business of the customer. A really small change, right? But this is recognizing that it's the customer that matters and the benefit the customer is getting that matters, and that's what we should be talking about. Make sense? Simple example. So you won't always get it right the first time. That's fine. Just apologize and try again. So I'll just wrap up with this, which is when you do get it right, some really cool things happen. Obviously, your customers are going to realize their intended business outcomes. If you've got a great product or solution and you deliver it well, they will get the outcomes they're desiring. They will have a delightful experience in working with you. And the thing I referred to before, you will have more highly engaged employees who will think and act in a customer-first way, right, if they truly believe this is your culture. And then what you'll start to see is that customer-centric behavior will just kind of happen naturally. You won't have to tell people to do it because people just assume that's what's expected, right, like the example that I talked about. And that is the actual end of my story. So thank you very much. I think I have 2 minutes if you have any questions, or we can finish 2 minutes early. Are we allowed to finish early? Yes. Cool. Or not. Great.
I would love to hear how your customer in Boston responded to that support that they got from the AE and CSN, and what the outcome of that was to the company and the relationship overall.
Yeah, I mean, we have a great relationship with them. They were obviously very appreciative. This is not something that we talked about publicly at all. It was just something that kind of happened. We got some pictures and some quotes from the customer afterwards, and it was just literally pictures of like our people in the room, and they were helping just move boxes of things around. It was just a really cool thing, and in the grand scheme of things, it probably doesn't matter that much, but it certainly strengthened our relationship with that customer, still a customer today. I'd have to check and see if they've expanded as a customer, but that wasn't really the point, you know what I mean? So it's great. It was a little bit of a one-off, but it was a cool example. Yeah. I'm really thirsty, by the way. Mm-hmm.
What are some of the best events, campaigns, strategic kind of initiatives that you've done to promote advocacy, to promote the customers engaging and sharing your story?
So I would say one of the most successful things for us is actually our advisory boards. Actually, there's probably two things, and one I didn't mention earlier. Advisory boards are a big one, where I don't think the express purpose of an advisory board is advocacy. But when you get someone, a stakeholder, to get that close to you and spend that much time with you, and we have boards at multiple levels. We have a CIO, a strategic board. where we talk about kind of bigger picture company strategy and the competitive landscape and that sort of thing. And then we have what we call a product advisory board, which is for people who actually own the success of Box inside their company. So they tend to be like a head of collaboration or end user computing, like someone who's closer to the action. That's much more focused on product feedback and roadmap and that sort of thing. We run those two boards simultaneously at different times and so forth, but with very different purposes. The intent is mostly to get feedback from them, share things like the roadmap, and then basically ask, how is this resonating? Does this work for you? But those people also become really strong advocates for you, right? Because they understand your strategy, they feel really connected to you, they're getting access directly to your executives, and they will go out and most of our one-to-one references happen from the people who sit on our advisory boards. So that's one. The second one that I'll leave you with is we launched a certification program. We call it BCP, Box Certified Professional. And that's, again, mainly the purpose is to go get people smart about Box, the product, and how to deploy it. But what we've done that's really cool is we do it at our headquarters, and we bring people into headquarters it's a 2-day program. We do it at the end of our week. And remember I talked about Friday lunch? We put them on stage at Friday lunch in front of the whole company, and we graduate them from the program. We sort of immerse them in our culture. And part of it is like, we believe there's a different way of doing work, and it's how we work at Box. We want them to see that for real. So those people now have a certification. They can put it on LinkedIn, right? But they also go away with a really strong connection and a really strong sense of advocacy for Box as a result of it. And we've now done those in London, in Tokyo, at HQ, and we'll be doing it at BoxWorks in a few weeks. So those are a couple examples, Ari, that hopefully are helpful. Great. Well, thank you all very much. I'm going to give it over to Ursula.